Real power is almost invisible. It doesn't argue, it doesn't rush, and it doesn't feel the need to interrupt silence just to prove it exists. Weak power is loud, fragile power performs, insecure power demands to be recognized, but stable power watches. It studies the room the way a chess player studies the board, not for attention but for understanding. Who is reacting, who is pretending, and who is trying too hard? While others burn energy being seen, he conserves energy being aware, and awareness is leverage. Most men are taught to equate dominance with volume, to speak over others, assert constantly, and fill every pause. But volume is often camouflage for uncertainty. The man who must constantly project strength is usually trying to convince himself first. The refined man does the opposite. He allows silence to stretch, lets conversations breathe, and listens past words into tone, posture, and hesitation, because he knows the loudest signals in any room are usually the unspoken ones. This is not passivity, this is control. He doesn't rush to display intelligence. He asks one precise question instead. He doesn't try to win the room. He tries to understand it. And in doing so, he quietly becomes the most grounded person in it. People feel that grounding. In tense situations where voices rise and egos tighten, he doesn't speed up with the chaos. His breathing stays even, his expression neutral, and his posture steady. He becomes the emotional reference point without announcing himself as one. That is presence without performance. Most men chase authority like it's a spotlight, wanting the visible seat, the title, and the recognition. But titles only amplify what's already inside. If you're reactive, power makes you volatile. If you're insecure, power makes you defensive. If you lack discipline, power makes you careless. That's why the rare man steps back before stepping up. He builds internal authority first, regulating his emotions before trying to influence others, learning to sit with discomfort, and practicing response instead of reaction. He understands that if you can't control your inner world, any outer power will eventually control you. So while others compete for dominance, he competes with his former self, measuring growth by composure, not applause, by stability, not spotlight. And in a world addicted to noise, that quiet mastery becomes unforgettable. Number one, the man who can leave the table owns the room. And not because he is trying to make a statement, but because he has already made peace with himself. Most people stay seated in conversations, arguments, and environments long after their inner alignment has expired. They stay because they want to win, to be understood, to be seen as right, or simply to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood. But the refined man operates differently. He measures the emotional cost of staying. He notices when his energy shifts from clarity to agitation, from grounded presence to subtle defensiveness. And the moment he senses that his participation is being driven by ego instead of purpose, he detaches, not dramatically, not with bitterness, but with quiet finality. This is not avoidance. Avoidance runs from discomfort. Mastery walks away from misalignment. There is no slammed door, no performative exit, and no need for the last word. His nervous system remains steady, his posture unchanged, and his tone even. And that composure is precisely what gives the exit weight. Because when a man can disengage without emotional leakage, it signals that he is not dependent on the outcome to feel whole. Psychologically, this reflects internal security. He does not need the room to validate him, so the room loses its leverage over him. Ironically, this is when his value increases, People sense when someone cannot be emotionally cornered. They feel the difference between a man who leaves because he is overwhelmed and a man who leaves because he is complete. The first departure feels reactive. The second feels intentional. Over time, this pattern builds a reputation that cannot be faked. He participates by choice, not by need. And choice is the root of power. When others realize you are free to leave at any moment, they begin to treat your presence with more care, not because you demand it, but because your standards are clear, even if unspoken. You do not stay where respect is absent. You do not argue where understanding is impossible. You do not perform where authenticity is unwelcome. This quiet boundary setting reshapes your environment. It teaches others how to engage with you without a single lecture. And perhaps most importantly, it protects your internal order. Because every time you remain in a situation that violates your values, you chip away at self-trust. But every time you walk away calmly, you reinforce a deeper message within yourself. My peace is not negotiable. That is the kind of message that builds unshakable presence. Number 2, silence is not emptiness. It is emotional discipline in its most visible form. In a world where people rush to fill every pause, silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. Many speak not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they are anxious about being perceived as irrelevant. The refined man has made peace with quiet. He does not experience silence as a void that must be filled, but as space where observation becomes sharper. When others speak, he is not rehearsing his reply. He is listening for patterns, contradictions, and emotional cues. His stillness is active, not passive. This is what psychologists refer to as regulation rather than suppression. He is not holding words back out of fear. He is choosing not to waste them. There is a difference between a man who cannot speak and a man who does not need to. The first feels tense, the second feels grounded, and people sense that grounding on a subconscious level. During tense conversations, most individuals speed up. Their speech becomes rapid, their gestures more animated, and their breathing shallow. The calm man slows down instead. He lets others finish. He pauses before responding. That pause does something powerful. It interrupts emotional momentum. It signals that reactions are not automatic here, they are considered. Over time, others begin to match his tempo. Conversations soften. Aggression diffuses. Not because he forced it, but because emotional states are contagious, and calm is just as contagious as chaos. His silence becomes a stabilizing force. It communicates without words that he is not threatened, not rushed, and not desperate to control the narrative. And in high-pressure environments, this quality becomes invaluable. Leaders who can tolerate silence make better decisions because they are not reacting to noise, they are responding to reality. The ability to sit in quiet without anxiety is often the dividing line between impulsive authority and composed influence. This is why his silence carries weight. It is not the silence of confusion. It is the silence of someone who sees more than he says. Number 3, the most respected man in the room is the least reactive. And this is not because he lacks emotion, but because he has built a relationship with it. Reactivity is immediate, unfiltered, and driven by impulse. Responsiveness is deliberate, filtered through awareness, and guided by intention. The refined man feels irritation, frustration, even anger, but there is space between feeling and expression. In that space lies choice, and in that choice lies power. Neuroscience shows that emotional regulation depends on the brain's ability to pause before acting, allowing the prefrontal cortex, the center of reasoning and judgment, to guide behavior instead of the more impulsive emotional centers. This pause is invisible to the eye, but its presence can be felt in the atmosphere around him. When challenged, he does not flare up to defend his ego. When misunderstood, he does not rush to correct every detail as if his worth depends on immediate validation. When criticized, he listens first, not because he agrees, but because he values clarity over noise. This does not mean he suppresses emotions or becomes passive. It means he refuses to let others dictate his internal state. He experiences the emotion fully, but he does not become it. Over time, people recognize that provoking him does not produce entertainment, drama, or emotional chaos. Attempts to destabilize him fall flat, like sparks landing on stone instead of dry grass, because he is not easily shaken. His responses, when he does choose to speak, carry unusual weight. People lean in because they know his words are chosen, not spilled. Emotional restraint quietly builds trust. Others feel safe confiding in someone who does not erupt under pressure or weaponize feelings in tense moments. They feel respect for someone who does not need to raise his voice, interrupt, or dominate conversations to be acknowledged. His presence alone regulates the emotional temperature of the room. This is quiet authority in action. It is not about suppressing intensity, but about mastering it. He understands that the first reaction is often the least intelligent one, and that dignity is preserved in the pause. In conflicts, he becomes the stabilizing force rather than another source of turbulence. In uncertainty, his steadiness becomes reassurance. In emotionally charged environments, he moves with calm precision, choosing words that de-escalate rather than inflame. And in a world where many people are ruled by their moods, impulses, and momentary frustrations, the man who remains grounded becomes a rare psychological anchor, someone whose strength is not loud but deeply felt, and whose control over himself is the reason others instinctively trust him. Number 4, he does not seek attention, he attracts observation. Attention is loud, bright, and short-lived, flaring up like a spark that burns hot and disappears just as quickly. Observation, on the other hand, is quiet, focused, and enduring. It lingers, it studies. The difference lies in intent. Those who chase attention project themselves outward in constant motion, adjusting their tone, their image, and their words, hoping to hold the spotlight a little longer. Their energy is spent asking to be seen. The refined man moves differently. His energy is centered inward, anchored in who he is rather than how he appears. Because he is not performing for approval, his behavior becomes natural and unforced. There is no theatrical edge, no subtle plea for validation hidden in his gestures. This authenticity creates intrigue. People begin to watch him not because he demands their eyes, but because he never asks for them in the first place. There is no obvious strategy, no exaggerated persona carefully crafted for effect. He is the same in different rooms, around different people, and under different circumstances. That consistency builds mystery, not because he is hiding something, but because he is not oversharing to control how others see him. In psychological terms, this reflects a secure attachment to his own self-image. He does not depend on constant feedback to feel steady or worthwhile. As a result, his presence feels grounded rather than needy, calm rather than restless. And grounded individuals stand out sharply in a culture addicted to exposure and noise. Others may be louder, more animated, and more visibly expressive, but his restraint gives him weight and depth. Like still water compared to restless ripples on the surface, his calm invites curiosity. People lean in without realizing it. They try to understand what makes him so unbothered, so composed, so unaffected by the usual social currents. That curiosity slowly transforms into respect when they discover the truth. It is not arrogance, not coldness, not indifference. It is inner sufficiency. He is not trying to be seen because he already sees himself clearly. And that quiet certainty speaks louder than any performance ever could. Number 5. Walking away from power can be a power move when the cost of staying is integrity. Not all leadership is worth having, and the refined man understands this at a level that goes far beyond ambition or recognition. Some positions shimmer with prestige from a distance, yet up close they quietly demand a trade. Principle for performance, values for visibility, and authenticity for applause. The mature man has trained himself to look past the shine. He evaluates opportunities not only by what they promise externally, but also by what they require internally. In the privacy of his own mind, away from noise and influence, he asks the questions most people avoid. Will this role pressure me to dilute my character? Will it pull me into endless ego contests, political maneuvering, or the exhausting burden of managing an image instead of living in truth? If the honest answer is yes, he steps back. Not because he fears responsibility, and not because he doubts his capability, but because he is clear about the kind of man he intends to remain when the spotlight fades. This clarity is a form of long-term intelligence. Short-term power is intoxicating. It flatters the ego and feeds the hunger to be seen. But hidden inside that rush are psychological costs that accumulate quietly over time. Chronic tension, unspoken resentment, restless sleep, and a gradual disconnection from one's own inner compass. Many men don't notice the erosion until they no longer recognize themselves. The refined man notices early. By declining what does not align, he protects something far more valuable than status, his inner stability. That stability becomes his foundation, and from that foundation he moves through life with a quiet consistency that others can feel even if they cannot explain it. He is not easily shaken because he is not living a divided life. Over time, people begin to recognize a pattern. He cannot be cornered into roles that do not fit him. He cannot be seduced by titles alone, nor pressured by expectations that clash with his core. This restraint gives his presence a certain weight. His no is calm, not defensive. His boundaries are firm, not loud. And because he does not say yes lightly, his eventual yes carries unusual meaning. When he does accept leadership, it is never to decorate his ego or inflate his image. It is because the responsibility aligns with his values and matches his capacity to serve without self-betrayal. His influence then becomes grounded, deliberate, and deeply trustworthy. Others sense that he leads not to be admired, but because something real needs to be carried, and he has chosen, with full awareness and steady hands, to carry it. Number 6, his presence is felt before it is explained, because coherence carries a psychological weight that people register instinctively, long before logic gets involved. Coherence means his thoughts, emotions, and actions move in the same direction. There is no visible contradiction between what he believes, how he feels, and how he behaves. No internal tug of war leaks into his tone, his posture, or his decisions. He says what he means, and he follows through without theatrical displays or emotional volatility. His emotional temperature matches his words, so nothing about him feels forced or rehearsed. That quiet alignment removes friction from interactions. People are not left decoding mixed signals or bracing for sudden mood shifts. They do not feel the subtle anxiety that comes from hidden agendas or unspoken resentment. Instead, they experience psychological ease. And ease is the foundation of trust. In environments filled with emotional noise, overreactions, insecurity, constant self-promotion, and performative confidence, his steadiness becomes a signal that stands out without trying to. Like a calm frequency cutting cleanly through static, his presence travels farther than louder personalities who rely on volume instead of substance. This is not dominance in the aggressive sense, it is stability. And stability is deeply attractive in both leadership and relationships because it makes others feel safe enough to be honest and grounded enough to think clearly. Over time, this consistent coherence shapes his life into something that does not need to be loudly advertised or defended. His influence grows quietly because people begin to rely on his predictability under pressure. His relationships deepen steadily because emotional safety allows real connection to form. His reputation builds on its own because patterns of behavior are more convincing than any personal branding. A masterpiece is never rushed into existence. It is shaped slowly through patience, precision, and intention. In the same way, the refined man understands that the most powerful presence is not constructed through force, intensity, or constant visibility, but through alignment sustained over time, until who he is on the inside and how he moves in the world become one and the same.